So let's jump right into Carly Bloom's It's All About That Cowboy. Now, as you know, I start with acknowledgments first because I like to see how people pay their gratitude forward. So let's start with that. This was my first novella, and I admit to having been a bit nervous about it. I'm not really known for being a short-winded girl, and conversations with me almost require pulling up a chair. I honestly wasn't sure I could write a complete story in under 30,000 words, but with the help of a few of my usual suspects and some new unsuspecting innocents, I was able to pull it off. You might think there'd be fewer people to thank than with a shorter book, but you'd be wrong. As usual, thank you to Allison Bliss for always believing in me, telling me I could do it, and to Sam Tashada for telling me to quit your witching. Sylvia Plath, y'all don't realize it, but you're good cop and bad cop, and I need you both desperately. And thank you to Jessica Snyder for being the voice of reason, to Amy Bierce, usually for reading every single scene on Facebook Messenger. That had to be a special kind of hell. Thank you to Sarah members Molly Mirren, Jolene Navarro, Frances Trelline, Markina Lee, Sasha Summers for helping me plot this puppy with cocktails. And thank you to my agent, Paige Wheeler, for always having my back. And to my editor, Madeline Colvita, for whose feedback gave me confidence and brought me out the best in Casey and Jessica. Last but not least, thank you for my readers for always being ready to pull up a chair. Now let me tell you a story. I believe I marked all entire of chapter 1 because I want to pull you in. I want you to feel the pull of this book. Jessica Acosta sat alone at Big Verde's single stoplight, fingers gripping the steering wheel of the bright red Porsche, feeling conspicuous as hell. Her sensible crossover SUV was in the shop for the scheduled maintenance. So yesterday she, her 11-year-old sister Hope, and her boss Carmen had driven all the way from Houston in Carmen's tiny red attention car. As if Carmen, with her bright blue hair and multiple piercings and tattoos, needed it. It had been cramped but fun. They jammed to all girl jams, talked all the girl talk, and squealed all the girl squeals when they hit 130 toll road outside of Seguin with its 85 miles per hour speed limit. Hope had loved it. Like Carmen was an adrenaline junkie, Jessica was more of the white-knuckled party pooper, but somebody had to be the grown-up of the trio, and it was usually her. They checked into Big Verde Motor Inn last night, only to check right back out. Carmen hadn't liked the way the room smelled, or the way it looked. She said the duvets had probably never been washed. She looked at a speck of something, and it insisted it was a bedbug. Jessica hadn't been able to detect the smell or the bedbugs, and knew that Carmen's criticisms only meant to land them in the nearby village chateau, a fancy hotel with a really great restaurant Carmen was dying to try. Since Hope had asthma allergies, was getting over a cold, Jessica couldn't risk the chance with Carmen's delicate nose really had detected the mold, so now they were at a suite at the village chateau, where Hope and Carmen were probably living it up in the luxury this very moment. It was just as well. It would be easier for Carmen to entertain Hope there while Jessica was at the funeral. Jessica looked up and down Main Street. Big Verde was her hometown, but she might as well be a stranger here. She and her mom had left that morning after high school graduation. She'd never been back until now. She was here for Mavis Long's funeral, for what she assumed to be a reading of her will. The lawyer hadn't called it that, but what else could it be? If you could be at my office at Monday, 9 a.m., we could have some items to discuss at the request of Miss Mavis. It was no surprise to Jessica that Hope would be mentioned in the will. Mavis had promised, and she kept her promises, but word got out, and it would. The folks in Big Verde would be extremely surprised, perplexed, titillated over the other words that indicated excitement over gossip fodder, whispers, scandal, drama, welcome home. Jessica shredded and drummed her fingers on the steering wheel. Her goal had been to get in and get out of the funeral like a ninja, not to roll in like a drag queen firing on a glitter bomb. Not that the drag queens necessarily drove red Porsches, but both would draw about the same amount of attention in Big Verde, Texas. She slunk down in her seat. Change, light, change. The town hadn't even had a stoplight when she'd grown up here, and since nobody had driven through the intersection during approximately 11 billion hours, she'd been sitting at it. Big Verde still shouldn't have one. It had to be broken, and if it was, everybody in town knew it. and there was probably watching her through their storefront windows to see how long it would take the stranger, her, to figure it out. She tapped the gas pedal in frustration, which resulted in the inadvertent engine revving. A sideways glance at a boutique called Kathy's Closet confirmed that she'd drawn some attention. A face peeked through the green shoe polish letters on the window, fee, fi, fo, fum, keep those badgers on the run, to stare at her. It was Friday, and the Big Verde Giants would apparently be battling the Smithtown Badgers at the football field later tonight. The band would play, the cheerleaders would cheer, and unless they hired a new coach since Jessica's cheerleading days, the Giants would lose. Kathy's Closet was new. Cute clothes in the window. It had probably been a hardware store back in the day. A woman who was probably Kathy came out to sweep the pristine sidewalk and covertly stare at Jessica. Jessica squinted back from behind her big sunglasses. Was that Kathy Schneider? Holy cow, it was. Kathy had hardly changed at all. Not only was she still rocking her 7th grade hairdo, but she wore enough accessory items to sink a ship. Thankfully, Jessica had dark sunglasses, shielding her eyes from the glare of Kathy's bangle bracelets. Jessica nearly waved. She and Kathy had been friends once, but Kathy didn't seem to recognize her now, and anyway, Jessica wasn't here for the reunion. She was here to pay her respects to Mavis Long, quickly, quietly, and without fanfare, in a bright red Porsche. Jessica swallowed a lump of the size of Texas, and Kathy wasn't going to be the only person from the past she'd seen this weekend in a town the size of Big Verde. Literally everyone was someone from her past, but it was Casey Long who had her concern. She prepared a little speech. Hey, Casey, how have you been? Remember how you were my first and tossed me aside like yesterday's garbage? But hoped that she wouldn't have to use it. Who knew? Maybe Casey even wasn't in Big Verde anymore. Maybe he hit the big rodeo in the world, and just like he always dreamed of, and was halfway across the country trying not to fall off a bull. She imagined him being tossed around an arena by an angry black bull, flaring nostrils and cartoon smoke coming out of its ears. And then she realized she accidentally revved the Porsche engine again, getting ready to charge. She sighed. Even if Casey didn't live in Big Verde anymore, he'd come home for his great-aunt's funeral. He wasn't long, so there would be no getting out of it. This was ridiculous. How long could a woman sit in an intersection? There was nothing coming, as far as the eye could see, to when Kathy turned her back. Jessica eased into the intersection and then hurried across. The tires squealed just a little because she wasn't used to so much power, and that's when she heard the siren. Her body broke out in a sweat. Her skin felt like it was being poked by a million needles. A rush of adrenaline, pure white-hot panic overtook her. Breathe at its worst is a traffic ticket. Just breathe. Dang it, dang it, dang it. Casey was going to be late for her great-aunt's funeral. Casey was going to be late for his great-aunt's funeral. Some dumb butt in a red Porsche had run a red light just as he turned onto Main Street. He'd have been happy to ignore it, pretend he hadn't seen it, except he just couldn't because, A, you couldn't pretend not to see a big red Porsche in Big Verde. B, there was an audience. He had no choice but to pull the guy over and provide some much-needed excitement for Big Verde's downtown business district. Kathy Snyder held up a broom as he drove by, and Danny Moreno, the pharmacist at the Rite Aid, waved and smiled as approval when Casey turned on the cruiser light. The idiot pulled over in front of the Pump and Go, so at least Casey wouldn't have to chase for him. 4 ranchers who'd probably been talking crap about the coffee bar came out to the sidewalk, ready to watch the show. Casey pulled up behind the Porsche. The Big Verde was a small town of locals, but pretty little Texas hill country. Views and green, clear waters of Rio Verde attracted tourists and city folks looking for country homes. Most of them were nice families who pumped much-needed revenue into the town during the summer, but few of them were idiots. He squinted at the Porsche and ran the plates. It registered to Cameron Ferracchio. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. He got out of his cruiser, waved at the sidewalk gawkers before he adopted his most menacing scowl. "Go get him, Tiger," one of the ranchers yelled. Casey couldn't let a grin ruin the scowl he perfected so that he ignored the fan club. He'd give the lady a warning and he'd be done with it. The car's window was rolled halfway down, but he couldn't see inside. At least 6 feet 4 inches tall, he towered over the car, which seemed like a dang toy next to him. The top of it barely passed his belt buckle. "Good morning," he said, at the general direction of the window beneath him. "You just blew through that red light." I'm sorry, officer. I think that light must be broken. It wasn't broken, but it did tend to have a mind of its own. Casey had sneaked through it a few times himself, although never while on duty. License and proof of insurance, please, Casey responded. He didn't have time to stand there socializing. Okay, hold on a sec. Casey sighed and tapped his foot. The voice, like the name, sounded familiar. It stirred up a feeling of nostalgia, which was weird because when he tried to locate Cowman Fosocio in his memory banks, he came up blank. He backed up a bit and peeked through the window, and what he saw was a very nice looking woman, and she dug around in the glove compartment. And Casey straightened quickly, feeling as if he sneaked a peek on purpose at her, which he absolutely had not. Trying to find the insurance card, the woman said with a muffled voice. Casey shifted from one foot to the next as he experienced irritation, excitement. He definitely heard that voice before. Still looking, she called. Casey looked at his watch. Ma'am, that's just fine. Just your license, please. I'll look up on the insurance. Okay. Hold on. He glanced in the window again, got an eyeful of her as Ms. Focio switched course to dig behind the passenger seat. It's in my purse. Casey stared up at the blue sky, whistled, tried not to look back into the car or the sidewalk pump-and-go gawkers who were by hoping to witness a pat-down. Oh, the woman said with a shaky voice that made Casey wonder what was coming next. My. He glanced back at the car to see the woman frantically patting herself down and squirming in the seat. God. She looked up at him. Big movie star glasses concealed nearly the entire upper half of her heart-shaped face. Below the glasses were pouty lips, pink shiny from something that was probably tasted like bubble gum. Not that he was thinking about what her lips tasted like. A part of him was definitely thinking about what her lips tasted like, and another part of him, for some stupid reason, felt like he already knew. Is there a problem, ma'am? He hoped his voice sounded firmer than he felt, because for some reason... Sorry. Where was I? For some reason... He was on shaky. His legs were shaky. I think I left my purse at the hotel. Casey stood straight and pinched the bridge of his nose. Mrs. Ferruccio, I'm afraid I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle. He sighed, cracked his knuckles. Crap. Now, I didn't pick out too many pages, so you don't have to worry. Page 329, he left the bar and climbed the alright staircase in the lobby. When he got to room 204, he stopped and took a breath. He was still riding the high that came from being with her, and he was excited from it. But what was making him sweat was something much more deeper. Was satisfying to tell Jess about his life, how he'd pulled himself together, gone to college, became a cop, then finally been elected sheriff. It was as if he'd worked all this time just to be able to someday look her in the eye and tell her that he'd done it. He'd become the man he always knew he could be. I knew you could do it, Casey. Of everything they said and done tonight, those words had been the sweetest. He had been a better man because of Jessica Acosta, no doubt about it. He'd been a hellion who gave his family fits, drove his teachers insane, irritated the hell out of fine folks in town who saw him as an entitled, spoiled brat. But Jessica had been something else in him. He thought she was crazy, believed that she was just been a good girl crush on a bad boy. But at some point he decided to become the guy that she thought he was. Even after she left, or maybe because she left, he kept trying, and because he done it, he squared his shoulders. Maybe it made his shirt tuck in, and he knocked on the door opened, and it wasn't Jess who answered, or her friend Carmen. It was a little girl. Hi, she said. Hi yourself. He tried looking over her shoulder into the room, but she only opened the door about 6 inches. Who are you? The child asked. He wanted to ask her the same question. I'm Casey. That seemed to be all she needed to hear. She opened the door wide and Casey peered in, but she still didn't see Jessica. He still didn't see Jessica. My eyes are playing tricks on me tonight. The little girl put her hands on her hips. I'm Hope. Casey finally got a good look at her. She was probably 10 or 11, cute as a button, and she had the same infectious grin as Dalton Reed. She had Down syndrome. Casey smiled back. My grandma used to live here, Hope said. Casey rubbed his chin. Was she somehow local? Did he have the wrong room? He looked at the number on the door. It was 204. That was what Zeke had sent him to, and besides, it was the little cutie was local, and he'd known it. My, a sultry voice said. Finally an adult. Casey looked up to see a gorgeous woman with big blue eyes, hair to match the staring over Hope's head. He realized that he'd seen her on TV at least once or twice. "You must be Carmen," he said. "Mm-hmm," Carmen said, looking at him up and down with a little smirk that suggested he might need to have a talk with Miss Acosta about kissing and telling. He hoped she hadn't left out the part where he made her toes curl. "And you must be Sheriff Long," Carmen said. "You're Sheriff Long?" Hope asked. "Uh-oh," Carmen muttered. "Listen, Hope, he's not. Sheriff Long is my daddy." "What the hell?" Casey took a step back. The room began to spin a little. "My grandma used to live here." "Crap." Hold on a minute, Cowboy," Carmen said, and then she shouted, "Jessica!" Hope ran into the hall and wrapped her arm around Casey, and Jess came to the door with her hair wrapped in a towel, her eyes wide and her mouth hanging open. "Hope, come here," she said, unwrapping the child from his legs. "No, no, no, let me go," Hope wailed. "He's my daddy." All the color had drained from Jess's face as she held on to the Hope. A man across the hall poked his head out the door. "Is everything okay?" "It's fine," Jessica said. The man looked at Casey, but Casey wouldn't talk. Nothing was fine. Hope's little face was streaked with tears. This was his child, and he hadn't even known about her? "Jess," he said. His voice didn't sound right. He felt like he was choking. "How could you?" He turned and stumbled down the hall, ran down the stairs, and didn't stop running until he got to the truck. People shouted his name, asked if he was all right, but he barely heard them. He had to get somewhere to sort all this out, somewhere private, a place where his own damn child wouldn't see him freak out. And that's part one of him jumping to conclusions and not talking things out and running away from the situation. Next part. Casey pulled through the gate of the fairgrounds. He sure hoped that he hadn't missed J.D.'s event. J.D. would never forgive him. Well, he would, but it wouldn't be a miserable 2 weeks waiting for him to get around it. He parked the pickup next to J.D. and looked around at the face in the rearview mirror. He hadn't shaved, and there had been bags underneath his eyes, staying up all night to do with that. A daughter. He had a daughter. It all made sense now. The Costas left because Jess had been pregnant, 18 years old, with her whole life ahead of her. He knocked her up, and no wonder she called it game over last night when there was no protection. She'd had her life ruined once already. He remembered the child's sweet, perfect face. Not ruined, but definitely altered. Things had not gone the way Jessica and her mom had painstakingly planned. Hope, it was a beautiful name. There was abandoned stone on Harper's Hill. It was technically private property, part of the 12,000-acre Rancho Conquista Verde, owned by the Kowalski family, but Jerome Kowalski didn't mind that Casey went there from time to time, and that's where he spent the night trying to wrap his mind around the new reality. At first he had been angry at Jess for keeping his own child a secret from him. But then he tried to put himself in her shoes. She'd been a teenager. Her mom had been in control. Had she really had a choice? What would he have done at 18? He liked to think that he would have stepped up to the plate, but the truth was he didn't know for sure, and this is why adults told teens they needed to be old enough to handle the consequences of having boom boom. As a grown man, Casey knew this. He had the particular talk with more than one kid, but at 18, none of that mattered. Now Jessica had come home, and she'd probably been trying to work up the nerve to tell him about Hope. She must have really felt terrified, not knowing how he would react, and he reacted horribly. But Hope had been so happy and thrilled to meet him. He saw nothing but joy in her face. Although he couldn't see himself, he had a pretty good idea what he looked like. And she didn't need to see that. He collected himself at the stone chapel, regained his composure. He was ready to face Hope with a smile and open his arms. He was her daddy, God blessed. And if this was the way his heart ached at the thought of Jess ever escaping his sight again with any indication, he still loved her mama. Yesterday he'd been Big Verde's most valuable sheriff. Today he had a family. They made this work, if Jess could even stand the sight of him after last night. He grabbed his hat off the seat and stuck it on his head just at the door and yanked it open. J.D. grabbed him by the arm. "Crap, Casey, I don't know where you been or why you haven't answered your phone, but we're on in a few minutes. I got us pushed back as far as I could. Get your butt out of the truck." J.D. gave a hard yank, and Casey stumbled out of the truck, slamming the door behind him. "And why the heck are you wearing chaps?" J.D. asked. "What's wrong with chaps? You look like an idiot." The two of them started walking. "Are we saddling up?" Casey asked. "Of course we're saddling up, and I warmed up Guinevere for you, but you need to get that on that pony and ride around a bit if we even got time for that." Casey glanced at the stands when they walked through the gate. He didn't see Jessica. That worried him, but surely she hadn't gone back to Euston, not after everything that had happened, unless she was so disgusted by his behavior that she never wanted to see him again. "Get your mind off that woman," J.D. said. "I know you think that team roping is a breeze compared to bull riding, but you can still get hurt." J.D. was right. Casey had to get his head on straight. 15 minutes later, he and Genevieve were in a box, looking at J.D. sitting atop Brazen on the other side of the chute. There were a young steer in the chute between them, raring to go. Casey's adrenaline was pumping. This was practically the best part. He and J.D. had been partners for 6 years, friends and or foes for damn near a lifetime. He wasn't exactly sure. He did with his eyes to say ready, but J.D. saw it and gave a small tight nod of his head. The gates opened, they were off. J.D. was the header and Casey rode the heeler. They thundered across the arena with J.D. in the lead. He was on fire. He tossed the rope and it flew through the air, hooking the steer's horns. Now it was Casey's turn as the heeler to go for the legs. The arena seemed to shrink as he homed in on the steer. Rope held high in the air, and then it was gone, flying. The steer kicked up, and the rope ensnared its leg with a perfect timing. Effortlessly, Casey got the rope around the saddle horn in the perfect dally before he looked up. The arena came back into focus, and there was Jessica hanging on the fence with Hope next to her. They waved and grinned, shouted just as the rope went taut, jerking the horse. Distracted, Casey wasn't ready, and in what seemed like slow motion, he fell off the horse. Fell off the dang horse. He landed with a thud and saw stars, got beneath, the breath knocked out of him too. J.D. rode up next to him, concern shone in his eyes, but only for a brief second. Then he started laughing. "I told you to get your mind off that woman. Are you sure you used to ride bulls?" "Ha ha," Casey wheezed. "Very funny." It didn't feel funny, though. A sharp pain nearly gutted him when he inhaled. When he went to stand back up, he discovered he couldn't. God blessed. J.D. jumped down from his horse, concern back in his eyes. "Hey, bud, you okay?" No, he was not okay, but he would be. "It's just my back." Soon he was surrounded by people saying things like, "Don't move," and "How many fingers am I holding up?" Someone mentioned an ambulance. An EMT looked maybe 12 years old, called for a long backboard and a neck brace. Crap. He just needed a few minutes to come out of the spasm. Suddenly Jessica was there. She dropped to her knees next to him and leaned over. "Casey, are you okay?" Her dark hair brushed his cheek. She smelled like sunshine, sounded like an angel, and her eyes were wide with fright. "I'm fine," he said, although for some reason he was having trouble getting air in his lung. "Where's my daughter?" Jessica put a finger to his lips. "Shh. Where is Casey? Hope's not your daughter. Everything is fine." Everything was fine? Everything was definitely not fine, because that meant... He couldn't finish that thought. "Jess, if she's not my child, then who is she?" Before he could get an answer, someone stuck a stupid oxygen mask over his face. And there's that moment where, they can't get that time to talk things out. They're jumping to conclusions, assuming the worst about each other. Here's the next paperclip. Annabelle and Jessica had been co-head cheerleaders, and Jessica had been chosen first, and then Anna had thrown such a fit that her parents had gone to the school board. Next thing Jessica knew, she was sharing the highly coveted position with Big Verdi's version of Nellie Oleson. Remember Little House on the Prairie? That's what they're referring to. Not that she was still mad about such a trivial thing. Much. Anna wore a super tight blue striped pinafore, which was actually in a costume. She carried a donut box in one hand and a Rite Aid bag in the other. She and Casey were about to play nurse and patient, or so she assumed. Casey definitely picked up some skills in the boom-boom department. Maybe Annabelle was a practice buddy. What did Jessica really know about Casey's life here in Big Verde? She must have been thinking too hard, because Anna suddenly turned around and looked at her. Jessica slunk down in her seat, which was stupid, and Anna stared right through, squinted her eyes, and then smiled. Dang it. But she didn't wave at Jessica or indicate she should come on up. She just turned on her heel, flipped her hair, and then sashayed her way to the front door, where she went inside without knocking. Jessica put her car in reverse back down the lane to the road. Casey had a life. She had done nothing but made it more difficult since the moment she got here. First, she made him late for his great-aunt's funeral, then nearly got caught behind the pool pump, which would have been embarrassing for her, but could have been career-ending for Casey, and finally, he'd been thoroughly traumatized by Hope calling him Daddy, before finally being sweetly disappointed to learn that he wasn't. And there was falling off the horse thing. She couldn't forget about that. Casey seemed to be doing really well in Big Verde. He was happy, content, successful, and maybe he had a thing going with Anna. Who was she to waltz in and ruin it? Tomorrow, after reading the will at the lawyer's office, she and Hope and Carmen would head back to Houston. Casey would remain in Big Verde. They were meant to be high school sweethearts and nothing more. Maybe you really couldn't go home again. And we're going to continue on. Jessica stood and Casey crossed the room in 3 quick steps. The next thing Jessica knew, she was in his arms. The world shrank to just the two of them, Casey's heart beating frantically beneath her cheek while her own pulse pounded in her head. Hope giggled, Carmen sighed, Gabriel cleared his throat. It was quite properly a full minute before Casey loosened his grip and took a small step back. I wasn't going to leave without saying goodbye, she said. I came by your house yesterday, but you were busy. Busy? I was probably asleep, he said. Anna made me take a muscle relaxant and it knocked me out. Yeah, I saw her. Casey laughed. Really? How did that go? Did you all try to high kick each other? Jessica couldn't help it. That idea kind of made her snort. Whatever there was between Casey and Anna, if there was anything at all, it obviously was not romantic. And every cell in her body breathed a sigh of relief, even though she was leaving for Houston today and Casey was staying here. We didn't speak, Jessica said. I just saw her and I just, left. I didn't want to disturb you. You could never disturb me. They sat down and Casey leaned over a slight wince. His breath tickled her ear as he whispered, Never with Anna. You know better than that, Jess. Anna had been her rival, and Casey was loyal beyond a fault. She shivered from the feel of his breath against her ear. Gabriel sat in his chair. I hear you took a tumble yesterday, Sheriff Long. Casey rolled his eyes. I'll never live it down. Hope sat straight up in her seat. Sheriff Long is my daddy. Oh, God, they were back to that. Casey broke out in a light sweat. Why did Hope keep saying that he was her daddy? It was jarring to hear that, to say the least. He looked at Jessica, and she merely rolled her eyes. She was irritated, but not surprised, so Casey relaxed a little. I know Sheriff Long is your daddy, Gabriel said to Hope. What? Now Jess's face went white. Jess? And we're here because your Grandma Mavis asked us to come together, Gabriel said. Her grandma? Casey blurted out. Then he looked at Jess. Yes, Casey, that's what I tried to tell you at the arena. Her grandma? Casey repeated. You're saying Aunt Mavis is her grandma? Aunt Mavis had one son, and he was an idiot of a cousin or uncle or whatever he was. Wade? The room felt like it flipped sideways as things clicked into place. Casey jumped to his feet in a blinding fit of white rage. That idiot... Blank, he started to shake. He needed to punch something, but instead he pulled Jess to her feet. Though he clenched teeth, he said, He touched you? How and when? The room went totally still. She'd been 18. He wrapped his arms around her. No wonder they left town that way. Her mom had to protect her. Casey, not me. Jessica was saying something. He let go and stared into her eyes. Her sweet, sweet eyes swallowed down another lump. My mom, she said. Hope is my sister. Gabrielle came around the desk. Have a seat, Casey. I'm so sorry I misspoke. I'm her sister, Hope said, smiling proudly. Casey sat down. He had no choice since his knees had basically given out. Jessica sat too, and her small hand took a hold of his. He tried to wrap his mind around what he just learned. Wade had been having an affair or something with Jessica's mom, gotten her pregnant, and she'd taken Jessica and left Big Verde without telling a soul where they were going. Did you not read the letters, Casey? Jessica's face, he focused on that. Why was her eyes tearing up? What letters? I suspect these are the letters right here, Gabriel said, holding up 5 envelopes all covered in hand-drawn hearts stamped with addresses to Casey Long. All were still sealed. Where did you get those? Jessica asked. From Mavis, Gabriel said. He handed them to Casey. 18-year-old Jessica's swirly, girly handwriting stared up at him. Casey took a deep breath. With shaky fingers, he popped a kissy lip seal that would have made him laugh on any other occasion. Is it okay for me to read these? He suddenly asked Jessica. Yes, of course, Jessica said, but then she looked at the envelopes with the hearts and flowers and kissy lips and added, but maybe not this very minute. Yes, of course. Wait a minute. Casey wanted to rip into them as if they contained a secret to immortality or the cure for cancer, but Jessica's cheeks were pink and getting pinker. He casually tucked them into his shirt pocket and gave it a gentle pat. I don't understand, Jessica. How did Mavis end up with those letters? Casey explored his memories from 12 years ago, that summer of his graduation. Everything was a blur, pain and panic because Jessica had disappeared. But he remembered that his parents had gone to Europe. It was supposed to be a graduation trip for Casey, but he'd been too crushed and depressed to go. He stayed home, and Aunt Mavis came to visit every day and check on him, and other things like the mail. Gabrielle pulled out another envelope out of his desk. I suspect this will explain everything. There was another letter? I had assumed we were to here for a reading of Mavis's will, Jess said, and quickly added, because of hope. Gabriel laughed softly. That only happens in the movies. I mean, I have your copy of the will right here, and I'm happy to go over it with you if you need me to. Mavis left Hope very well cared for, but you were both called here today because Mavis wanted you and Casey in the same room while I read this to you. Gabriel cleared his throat dramatically. Dear Jessica and Casey, this is an apology for the terrible thing I have done. 5 minutes later, everyone sat quietly digesting what they just heard. Jessica anxiously bit her lip, tried to remain in her seat because what she wanted to do was jump up and down and stomp her feet, and that wasn't appropriate at all. Mavis had intercepted the letters. She'd known about Wade's misdeed and had been afraid Jessica would tell Casey that he had tell someone and they would tell someone else. Honestly, Mavis might have been right. They were teenagers. They had been too much at stake, way more than simply the long family reputation. Casey sighed and leaned forward to rest his elbow on his knees, shaking his head. I just don't know how my family could have done yours any more wrong. In her confession, Mavis asked for our forgiveness. I loved her way too much not to give it to her, Jessica said. Casey looked at her as if she had two heads. You really did love her, didn't you? I really did. And Mavis wasn't the only person she really loved in Big Verde. What she felt for Casey had not been a teenage crush. What she felt for him now was even stronger. From that moment he walked into the room and enveloped her in his arms. She felt safe, and for her that was a strong, rare emotion. She'd been adrift for 12 years, and Casey was the anchor. She couldn't stand the thought of leaving him again, but she couldn't conceive another way around it. Man, Carmen said, you folks certainly know how to dish out the drama in this town. Upon hearing the word drama, Hope put a hand to her forehead as if she were about to swoon. Carmen had taught her to do that whenever someone was being overly dramatic. It made Gabriel laugh and relieved at least some of the tension in the room, and when Hope's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, that relieves the rest. Somebody's hungry, Jessica said. Should we head to the Connor Cafe for a late breakfast? She wanted to spend as much time as possible with Casey before heading back to Houston. A little spark of panic fluttered in her chest. She clutched her hand tightly, and it went away. Can we make it brunch? Carmen asked. I have a bit of business with Mr. Castro here. Jessica looked at Gabrielle. Was Carmen kidding? She's my 10 o'clock appointment, he said. What possible business could Carmen need to conduct in Big Verde that involved a lawyer? Whatever it was, Jessica recognized her friend's stubborn, impish grin. There was no point in asking. She would not get it out of her, not right away, and not right now. And that's where I'm going to leave you wondering, did all three, the trio that originally came to Big Verde, go back to Houston? Did somehow Casey and Jess work things out and overcome both of their jumping to conclusions, if you will? Now that he knows that Hope is not his daughter, that is Jess's sister, that should ease things, right? Or did Jess think about Anna being with Casey, even though he said there was nothing there and there never would be? I'm leaving you with so many questions that the only way to find the answers to these questions is read the book. About the author. Carly Bloom began writing her career as a family humor columnist and blogger in a pursuit she abandoned with her children. She grew old enough to literally die from embarrassment to save their delicate lives. Carly turned to penning steamy contemporary romance, the kind that bear chests on the covers. Carly and her husband raised their mortified brood of offspring on a cattle ranch in South Texas. You can learn more about CarlyBloomBooks.com at Twitter at CarlyBloomBooks, Facebook.com/author Carly Bloom, and Instagram at CarlyBloomBooks. And it did make me want to read these other Carly Bloom books. So I have some now that I'm going to definitely be looking for, like Big Bad Cowboy by Carly Bloom, Cowboy Come Home by Carly Bloom, and Must Love Cowboys by Carly Bloom. And there's some other books in here that they mention that I might actually have to look for. So, like Only a Cowboy Will Do by A.J. Pine. So that sounds really good too. Thank you for tuning in. And the book rating for that book, there was a lot of passion. The passion kind of outweighed the storyline, if you will. There was a good storyline, yes. So I'm going to give it a 5. It's the middle of the road. Could have went either way, but 5 is middle of the road. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to this book review. Hope you pick up the book to find out the answers to those burning questions. And make sure that you're keeping your 3 feet of social distance. You're washing your hands when you can't. You're using your hand sanitizer. You're wearing that mask. There's no excuse. We're still in a pandemic. And I wish you faith, hope, and love, joy in your heart, lots of prosperity in your bank as well as your heart as well. Remember, it's better to give than to receive. And the greatest form of payment is 2 words, thank you, and tell them to do that gift for someone else. God bless each and every one of you. Hope to see you tomorrow.